Salutations, I'm Gil.
And I'm Gil, and this is Strategic Prepper.
Hey, I just finished filming this video you're about to watch, and I forgot to mention this in the beginning, so here I am. So, check out our Patreon channel, okay? Here on YouTube, we try to share our knowledge and teach people how to use a systematic approach, to identify hazards and then mitigate them, okay, via preparedness, right, or being a prepper. And so we can get a lot more in depth in Patreon. We can also say things on Patreon that we don't say here. But a lot of these subjects, we kind of hit the wave tops to give people a general idea. But it takes a lot more time to break down these subjects in depth. And so check us out on Patreon. We've got monthly quick tips that we recently just started. We're going to be doing monthly live streams. We've already, if you watched my tactical setup video, I've already got kind of a class, so to speak, or a video instructional on there, a little more in depth on how to build that. So check out the Patreon and enjoy the video. So I know some of you guys have heard of potential rolling blackouts this summer. Nothing to be worried about, nothing to panic about, I should say. This isn't the first time we've heard about this. I know some of you guys have been around for a while, nodding your heads. You've heard this before. So stay tuned. We'll go over some simple things that we can do to get ready for this.
So let's talk about what's driving this. I got some articles pulled up. You'll see it on the screen. One from CNET, one from Wall Street Journal, and one from E&E News. Stands for Energy and Environmental. And basically what we're looking at is an elevated risk of blackouts in the Midwest and the West. Okay, and CNET actually breaks down, a couple of them break down the different grids and operators and whatnot. And what it comes down to is the drought conditions are resulting in reduced capacity from the hydro plants. Some other plants are down for maintenance and whatnot. They're expecting higher than average draw on the grid because of higher than average expected temperatures. And so what these different organizations, for example, E&E News is stating that the North American Electric Reliability Corps basically did a study, and this is part of their assessment, the Midwest, Texas, Southern California, facing an increased risk of power shortages. And then you also have, they talk about the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, Grid Manager, Energy Market Operator, says they're facing a capacity shortfall in the north and central areas. And so basically you can look up these articles and you can look up these sources, and there's other sources too. It's looking like the Midwest is at a higher risk than the West right now, based on what they're saying. But like we said earlier, not the end of the world, and also not the first time we've seen this. So definitely nothing to panic about. It doesn't mean we're going to enter the dark ages. It just means that for some people it might be a rough summer.
So let's talk about some things we can do. I got my notes here. So let's start small, right? If we know that there's a possibility of being without power for a while, let's have some water bottles, some water source on hand, non-perishable foods, which, you know, if you've been doing everything else, you already have this, right? So depending on how far along you are in your preparedness journey, this won't be that big of an issue anyway. But we're going to tackle this subject specifically in terms of rolling blackouts, assuming for a second that you haven't done anything else. So water bottles, non-perishable foods. Remember, you're not going to have power. You definitely want to stay hydrated. You want to, have your fridges and freezer stocked, but the big thing too is having ice packs or water bottles in your fridge and freezer. So like in your freezer, those reusable ice packs, water bottles too. I would refrain from just filling it with regular ice, because eventually if the ice melts, you're going to have water everywhere. At least with the reusable ice packs, you won't. And it'll help keep everything cooler longer. Same thing with the fridge. Water bottles in the fridge will help keep the fridge cooler. Now with those, I would keep those in the fridge. So in the event of a power outage, I would not open the fridge to drink those. I would keep them in the fridge and not use them. I would set those aside just to keep the fridge a little cooler. You could also use a cooler, especially if it's a planned blackout. Before the blackout, move stuff out of the fridge that you might want to access, put it in ice in a cooler. That way, as you're opening and closing it, you're not opening and closing the fridge, which is going to let that warm air in. But you could also do it in an unplanned blackout. Just do it quickly, do it early, Remember, the longer that door is open, the more warm air is hitting the fridge. Keep curtains closed, curtains, blinds. Remember that sun entering the room in the house is heating up the house. Depending on where you're at and how long it lasts for the day. If the house is already heated up, right, because initially you have that cool air you're trying to keep inside the house. If it's a long blackout and it's starting to get pretty hot, if it's windy outside, you can start opening up windows to let it cross breeze in. Again, that'll depend on where you're at and how long it is and the conditions. So that's kind of your initial level, right? Your level 2 would be a generator, so a gas generator. And there are different types of gas generators. We have the gasoline generators versus the inverter generators. And so what the inverter allows us to do is run electronics more safely on that generator. It converts that power, again, runs it through an inverter into a safe source. So with a regular generator, as that generator revs up and down, that will cause spikes in your power source. Not good for a lot of electronics, and that inverter generator will give you a nice, clean, steady power stream for your electronics. Remember, too, appliances have electronics in them. Most of them have processors in them to control the compressors. If you already have a regular gasoline generator, so one thing to note between the two, your regular gasoline generators are generally going to be cheaper than the inverters. Your peak power capability is generally going to be higher. So if you start shopping around, you'll notice you can get a much higher power level regular generator. So you can run that stuff through an inverter, right? So if you already have one, you just buy an inverter to plug in and then run your stuff off of that to give that clean power. So like I said, inverter or regular. The cool thing with the inverter generators is because it doesn't rely on the RPM as much like the regular generators does, or I guess I should say because the RPM doesn't affect electrical output and how clean the energy is, they will rev down and idle, and they're quieter when they're using a lower draw. Okay, so the more fuel efficient, the quieter. So you can use that before you go out and buy a generator, especially if you're doing this now and you have time, right? So we're planning ahead. Figure out what you want to power. It's better if you pick and choose versus trying to power everything. Some of you guys are going to have the resources to do a whole house generator, and that's awesome. But for most of us, pick and choose, right? Maybe it's an air conditioner and maybe it's the fridge, right? So pick and choose, figure out what the draw is going to be, and then make sure you give yourself a little bit of a cushion. So we have that fuel storage as well. You've got to store fuel for that. Remember the run times in these generators typically at a quarter load if you read the instructions. So if it says 8 hours at a quarter load, well, at a half or 3/4 load, it's not going to be that long, okay? Make sure you know how much fuel you're going to need. Store in a safe manner. Use proper gas cans, metal jerry cans, the safety cans. All right, make sure we're storing them in a safe spot and not inside the house, things like that. Propane versus gasoline. Make sure you treat the gasoline. I use stable in my gasoline. If you can pump non-ethanol fuel, that'd be better too. Like I said, propane as well. The other thing too, maintenance. You've got to maintain your equipment. Make sure you actually run your generator. Make sure the oil's been changed if it's an older generator, spark plugs, all that kind of stuff. Make sure it's going to be ready when you need it. So let's say you have your generator. It'll power your fridge. You could also have some fans. They take a very little electricity. So you could have a bunch of fans, buy those, hook them up to your generator, and then they'll help cool you off. The next step above that would be a mobile air conditioner. Okay, so we see these at Lowe's all the time. They got 4 little wheels. They got a discharge hose that you put in the window. Pick a room in the house where everyone hangs out. Smaller room, the better. It'll be easier to cool, and then you can run that AC unit. With all this stuff, typically you don't want to run it all the time. So let's say hypothetically, we're going to have an 8-hour window in the middle of the day, right? 8 hours, starting at 10 a.m., 8 hours, no power. Well, you don't want to run your fridge and your AC the whole 8 hours. You're going to use a lot of fuel, right? So typically, 10 a.m. power goes off. I would wait a bit, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and then get the generator running. So naturally, the temperatures start to rise. Run the AC, run the fridge, allow the fridge to cool itself back down. Same thing with the AC. Maybe I run the AC for 30 minutes in the room, maybe an hour, right? Pick your interval, and then you shut it off, and then you're kind of cycling on and off, on and off. Helps saves fuel. And then one other thing would be your solar generator. So you're looking at a Jackery 500, all right? And I can't see the camera. I can't see what you guys are seeing right now, so hopefully it'll show up. So Jackery 500, that's got a 500 watt capacity. Now they make a Jackery 1000, and Eco Blue, I believe, has a 1500 watt capacity generator. You're gonna pay about $1 a watt, at least from what I've seen. Okay, so 1500 watt solar generator, probably about 1500 bucks. And then they make smaller ones as well. And there's other companies. So, you know, like with the fans, you could hook up the fans to the solar generator because they're going to use a lot less power. Hook up a solar panel outside to keep that charged. You could use that to charge your computers. You could use that to charge your phones, whatnot. It's a great option. They can get a little pricey, especially when you start pricing that compared to a gasoline generator. But you can use that indoors, and they're quiet. You know, with the fridge, depending on some of you off-road guys, you can get some of those off-road fridges that I put in the back of the vehicle that will also run off of those. Okay, and so the next level above that, I would say, which would be the best option, which I think every serious prepper or every homesteader is shooting for, is solar. Either a full or partial solar system. You know, if you're already running your essentials off solar, then the rolling blackouts really aren't going to affect you that much. And then one little thing on top of that that you can do, and this is something I'm actually going to be doing this summer. Actually, probably next week I'll start the project. Insulation, right? So what I found is when the temperature gets in the mid-90s and we get to the mid part of the day, my AC unit cannot cool the house. The house will steadily rise in the temperature until it gets about 78. It won't go any lower until it cools off. And what we're figuring out is, I had AC guy here and all that. The AC unit's working fine. The attic is poorly insulated, and the flexible HVAC ducts are poorly insulated. So what that means is the attic gets so hot that it basically roasts my HVAC ducts, and then the air doesn't cool the house properly. So for the summer, a big thing that from my research, and we'll find out, I will let you guys know, that helps reduce that heat is radiant barrier. Right, a lot of your rafters in your attics are not insulated. That radiant barrier. So what happens is that radiant energy from the sun heats up your shingles, and it heats up your roof decking, and that's really what contributes the most to the heat in your attic. So that radiant barrier will help keep the attic cooler. So it'll reflect a lot of that heat, and the style that I'm going to use is different types. It's a 2-layer, so one midway up the rafter, one on the outside, so you end up with 2 layers and then an air gap in between, which air is also an insulator. And then also I will be adding unbatted fiberglass insulation on the floor on top of the old stuff. Okay, so and so yeah, you know, that'll help your AC run more efficiently, save you energy. Naturally, if more people did that, the draw on the grid would be a little less. But the big thing too is if you do lose power, your house won't heat up quite as quickly. And so that's pretty much what we got. These are some steps we can take. Again, I gave you the whole spectrum from the easiest kind of to the hardest / most expensive. Again, it's not new. It's not the end of the world. This is pretty normal. Arguably, you could say it's getting worse. We do know that the grid is aging, and that is a concern long term, that at some point, you know, these problems might be too much for the grid as a whole. But reality is, these reports, like I said, they're not the first time we've heard them. A lot of you guys have been around a while, have heard this stuff before. So we know it's a possibility. If you're in the areas that we mentioned, hey, take some precautions. Do what you can. Prepare for it. Hopefully you won't need it. Stay safe. Stay prepared.